reason why we're here today, we sent out a press release earlier saying we had an in-custody death early this morning. Mr. Watkins has passed away, and we want to be transparent as possible about what occurred. The release we sent out earlier today was very detailed in what happened. We wanted to go ahead and release the body cam video as soon as possible as well, because we want everybody to know exactly what happened. We originally responded on a call for a criminal mischief in Cherrystone, where he was a suspect. When we got there, he was not on scene. His family told us that he had tore parts of the house apart. Later on, about an hour later, a family member came up to the West Precinct and told us that he was over by the Sonic at MLK and 15th Street. We sent an officer out to that location. He was sitting on a light pole. We talked to him. He was very calm. We had no charges at that point because anything related to that criminal mischief would have been a warrant situation. The officer told him, of course, you can't stay here. You need to go home or go somewhere else. You can't just stay here all night. He got up and started to walk off. Once that happened, the officer that was on that criminal mischief call drives up and he says, hey, that's my suspect in the criminal mischief. They call his name a couple times. He continues to walk off. At that point, you'll hear later when the footage is released, the officer tells him, hey, we don't have any charges, let him go. So he continues to walk off and then he starts to run. When the officers look towards 15th Street, he's taking off all of his clothes. At that point, he's where traffic is and he's completely naked. At that point, the officers have to act. They go to the intersection. He becomes aggressive. The officers tase him. He's taken into custody after a struggle, and then medical personnel arrives, I believe, approximately 7 minutes later. He's transported to DCH, and then he dies around an hour or an hour and a half later. On the way to DCH, he told us that he had Mojo earlier that day, which is a drug. It's normally synthetic marijuana. Again, I just want to stress that we're releasing the body cam footage, but with that footage, out of respect to him and his family, we have blurred certain images. His private areas have been blurred. We don't need to have that everywhere. Our officers' faces have been blurred for their safety, for an officer safety reason. That'll be put out later today. I'll take any questions that you have.
Is this the same Kendrell Watkins that has had prior charges, to your knowledge?
He has had charges before, but I'm not going to get into his criminal history today. And just so everybody knows, Tuscaloosa County Violent Crimes Unit is investigating this case. We do not have investigators investigating this case. Anytime an agency is involved in something, they back away and let the other agencies take over.
Chief, is this the first in custody death since 2007 and another taser incident, or 2017 and another taser incident?
It's first one since 2017, but taser wasn't involved in that incident.
Okay. How many times was he tased?
You'll see in the video, they'll fire the taser the first time. One prong goes in, the other one doesn't, so it doesn't work. At that point, they tase him a second time, and you'll see at that point where he goes to the ground. And while they're fighting on the ground, you'll see that in the video, the officers will drop stun, which is not a shooting tase, but actually takes a taser to try and get compliance at that point.
Was the taser a part of the death or the drug that he was taking at the time?
That's going to be an ongoing investigation as well as an autopsy, and I can't speak to that. He was talking with officers on the way to the hospital, and he was there for over an hour.
What was he saying when talking to the officers on the way to the hospital?
The only thing I can release is, he was saying that he had taken Mojo earlier that day.
We saw a family arrive a few minutes earlier. What, if anything, have you said to Mr. Watkins' family if you haven't had a chance to talk to him? How do you try to explain to them what happened?
Of course, we're going to give our condolences. He's somebody's brother, he's somebody's son. We all have family. Nobody ever wants to see anybody hurt. Nobody ever wants to see anybody die. We're showing them the video. We want them to see exactly what happened. We're being as transparent as humanly possible in this because we want everybody to know that this is what happened. Our officers, they did what their training told them to do. We don't like to fight people. People get extremely hurt in fights, suspects and officers. That's why we have less lethal weapons like tasers. And, you know, this is a tragic outcome, but the officers did what they did their training.
What can you tell us about the type of tasers that you use in the department?
I don't have the specifics on those tasers.
In what specific instance are officers instructed to start using their tasers?
When we have tasers, it's just like pepper spray and other type things. We don't want to get in a fist fight with somebody. That's the last thing we want to do. So if people do not comply, they have the option at that point to tase them. He was charged with a crime at that point. So we don't want something to escalate. Normally a taser will take care of that because it prevents us from getting in that fight and somebody getting hurt.
Chief, with everything that's going on around right now, a lot of eyes will be on you guys because someone, not necessarily died in police custody, but, he died after dealing with police officers. How important is transparency right now from your department?
It's very important. I think it's important all the way across the country. We sent out a very detailed release, probably more detailed than, the media was expecting. The immediate release of the body cam video, talking to the district attorney, yes, he said release the body cam video. We wanted people to know what happened. Like I said, you have to be transparent in today's times, and we're as a department, we're doing that.
Now, piggybacking off of what you just said, I mean, is the city of Tuscaloosa prepared for outrage? Because a lot of people will look at it as a black and white thing or just in police custody. Are you prepared for that?
We want people to understand that violence is not a solution to anything. We want people to know that we are being transparent. You see so many times these incidents where people aren't releasing body cam footage, where they're not telling what happened. We are. We're saying here, within 24 hours, we're telling you everything that happened, and we're giving you the body cam footage. So we hope people understand that, hey, we're doing our jobs. Our officers are doing what they have to do. The officers were hurt as well. They had cuts of other eyes. But, we're preparing something were to happen like that, but we don't want that to happen. Through all of this, with George Floyd, the citizens of Tuscaloosa protested peacefully. We don't want to bring violence to our city. That's the last thing anybody did, and we hope they continue to do that.
And do you believe your office acted in the correct way during this situation?
I believe my officers acted to their training, yes. I'll take one more question.
Do you think there was any role that mental illness might have played with this? That he had any kind of history of like welfare calls, anything like that?
I'm not going to get into the history we had. That'll, pulling up his criminal background, and if he had mental illness or anything like that, we'll kind of be turning that at a later date. So,
District Attorney, I would like to hear maybe your response though on this.
Well, I think first of all, anytime somebody dies when they're in or shortly after police custody, obviously it raises a legitimate question in the public mind. The fact though, and Jabari, going back to your question earlier about are you ready for outrage, right? And the mere fact that somebody's got in police custody does not mean that outrage is the appropriate response. And there are times when outrage and anger is clearly appropriate, and I understand that. But that doesn't mean that every time that it happens, that that's an appropriate response. And I've got to say a couple of things here, right? So at the end of the day, what's going to happen is this case, and the Tuscaloosa Police Department has no part within the investigation of this case. It's the Tuscaloosa County Violent Crimes Unit, and it's got other officers from other agencies over there doing that. They've been out. I've worked closely with them today, and I want to brag about them because they've done an exceptional job, very thorough in the investigation that they've done, very, very thoughtful. And what does that do? It helps us to understand what happened out there, and it also helps the public to understand what happened out there. At the end of the day, with respect to the officers who were involved, the criminality or not of their conduct, okay, will not be decided by me, but rather by a grand jury. At the same time, I can say this: I watched all of the video from beginning to end. Okay, and I am extremely proud of the conduct, the decency, the human decency, the compassion, and the professionalism of those police officers. Okay, now again, that doesn't speak to any criminality. Some other group of people will make that determination, but it makes me proud to see the way that they acted out there, especially in light of what you brought up earlier, Jabari, this upset that is storming the nation, right? And a lot of times, understandably so, right? So when I come in here wondering what is it that I'm going to see, what I see makes me proud. Okay, proud as district attorney, proud as resident here of Tuscaloosa County, proud of our relationship with the Tuscaloosa Police Department and other local law enforcement. So, and I think that when you see the body cam footage, that will be borne out for you as well.
And those officers, are they still on duty or?
It's our policy, anytime an officer is involved in anything like this, they're on administrative leave, and that's our policy anytime something happens.
So how many are on administrative leave?
2 officers.
And how long does that last then until the end of the investigation by TCU?
Yes.
And how does, you know, something like this, how does it have an effect on an officer?
It's tough. You know, officers are human just like everybody else. We have emotions. You know, those officers have to go tonight and try and sleep knowing that what they did was right because they did their training, but the outcome, nobody wants that outcome. So it weighs on officers. They have a tough job right now, extremely tough job, and you know it weighs on them.
How do you feel, that they chose to first use a taser versus, another lethal weapon, you know, as a force in that situation that they were dealing with?
I'm not going to sit here and second guess the officers' decisions. They used what they thought they needed to use at the time. It's so easy for somebody to sit back and say, "Oh, I would have done this, I would have done this," but we make split-second decisions, and I'm not going to question anything they did, and I don't believe you will either once you see the videos.
Chief, this may not be your wheelhouse, but can you speak at all as to why the suspect was taken to VCH Norfolk instead of VCH in Tuscaloosa?
I believe because he had the narcotics, so they took him to go there. Thank y'all so much for coming today. We're going to have the video for you very shortly.